I think the appeal of Deep Purple to me then, I outlined a little bit of this in the Deep Purple in Rock review. I just upload. I just want to kind of refresh and outline it here again with having read out that piece again, kind of reflecting on it again now. I read out a piece I wrote in a little self-published zine of sorts. Anyway, so with Deep Purple, the one's already into Led Zeppelin, one's, I guess, found their way into Black Sabbath, although Deep Purple represented this interesting middle ground, and what was fantastic is it didn't have the blues kind of emphasis, or I might say pretensions, of Led Zeppelin. It wasn't quite the kind of alienating heavy metal kind of subcultural kind of swallowing that was Sabbath engulfment, you know. But there was with Deep Purple, you had this, I think it was the organ sound. Like, there was something pristine and, like, lovely classic rock about it. There was something pure and wholesome about it by comparison to even the Led Zeppelin was a bit staid, you know. It was a bit done. It just felt a bit, like, overplayed in Triple M. And outside of Smoke on the Water, which certainly was absolutely the apotheosis of that Triple M nonsense, everything else in Deep Purple was interesting, was virtuosic. I was already into, you know, Yes and Rush, and I was getting into, you know, Crimson. Obviously I was into Pink Floyd, and so the dare I say proggy touches of, particularly in Mark II and an album like Machine Head, absolutely loved. Lazy, Space Truckin, you know, Highway Star, they were absolutely extraordinary listens. Martin Birch's contribution to this album as an engineer cannot be understated. He's credited as the catalyst on Deep Purple in Rock. Catalyst. Which is to say that he is responsible. Ritchie Blackmore wanted a certain sound, he wasn't getting it, he wanted to match Led Zeppelin, and he felt Martin Birch allowed him to do that. Now, we know how big Ritchie Blackmore's ego is, right? He was willing to commend Martin Birch as responsible for Deep Purple's heaviness and their success subsequently as a result. And Deep Purple, I think, without this particular album, Machine Head, would feel like a group which never quite achieved, for me, a pristine, absolutely holistic release which demonstrates their sound. I mean, I guess if it weren't for Machine Head, it'd be made in Japan, although there's no made in Japan without the Machine Head track list, obviously. In Rock was a bit rusty and rough and kind of heavy. It didn't demonstrate. It was far more of a guitar album than an organ album. And then Fireball's getting there, although I think the track list isn't as strong. Apparently it was rushed, and I think the production isn't as smooth as a result, partly, possibly. And then Machine Head was the perfect realization. It's the greatest third entry in a trilogy of a band's lineup you might ever hear. It's absolutely brilliant. I love heavy metal when it was defined by an album like this. This is almost the most fun and exciting era of heavy metal before, like, the average heavy metal album becomes... I mean, even if the average heavy metal albums becomes something like Iron Maiden's Peace of Mind, that's still brilliant and all that. But when the average heavy metal album becomes something like, I don't know, you know, the era of the 90s of Tool and Faith No More and Alice in Chains and all this... I don't dislike some of these bands, but it leads to... I don't like Rage Against the Machine. It leads to the world of Limp Bizkit and NPE and Papa Roach, whatever garbage. Like, it's just... yeah. Like, there's way too much garbage attached to metal after a while, let's say that. But at the source, when a heavy metal band means Deep Purple in 1972, yeah, circa, I don't know, the last year, that's probably a valid thing to claim, is circa 1983. I like that world, I really do. Deep Purple's Machine Head stands today as one of the most satisfying productions in the history of rock music, in my opinion. One of the few really holistic and good albums in the hard rock canon, because let's face it, hard rock, it's like, I mean, hard rock is just... Maybe if it's not just ripping off Led Zeppelin, because even Deep Purple were. I mean, where are the great hard rock albums? I mean, does a great hard rock album just need to sound like a certain thing? Not something unique and special and interesting and unpredictable, but it just needs to sound like an average Grand Funk Railroad or average AC/DC release or the first Guns N' Roses album, you know? Like, it's just... hard rock. I don't like Aerosmith. But Americans don't realize that outside of America, no one likes Aerosmith. Okay, maybe Canada as well. Whatever. The point is, I find myself enjoying Deep Purple's Machine Head as much as I, you know, pretentious silly me likes my, you know, Genesis Nursery Crime, or, you know, my Pink Floyd Wish You Were Here, you know, Gentle Giant Octopus, I don't know, Van de Graaff Generator, The Least We Can Do Is Wave to Each Other. Machine Head is with those. It's awesome. It's brilliant. It's a fairly straightforward release. It's meant to be, it has the function of a hard rock release, and yet the production, the arrangements, everything is so interesting and impressive. it's almost like it was tailor made for both crowds, the kind of beer drinking numbnuts, well, whatever, but hard rock kind of gig going crowd, and those who are more interested in the more, I guess, dare I say, sophisticated world of rock recording, which was opening up in the early 1970s. Experiments that, like from Led Zeppelin, yes, Genesis, ELP. There was many interesting things going on, and Deep Purple wanted to participate and release a classic for all time, as some of these other acts were. And I think they wholly achieved that with the Machine Head album.